Oh, you know what? I got the title wrong. Just as the channel starts, I am updating the title on our little video layout here because hello, everybody, and welcome to Watching 100 Movies. I'm Christiana Ellis,
I am Mike Mateen.
and tonight is a Boston edition of our Watching 100 Movies show. We're talking a trio of movies set in Beantown. Oh, I just
Yep.
heard. Oh, I got a little beep at me because I hit the same key too many times. Good Will Hunting, Fever Pitch, and The Town. Okay, so now it's correct on the screen, and I also announced the three movies. So, for folks who may have not listened to our previous episode, the inspiration for this episode was that I live in Boston, or in the Boston area at least, and a few weeks ago, Mike and family came and visited in Boston, and so we hung out and we talked about it, and then you suggested let's watch some Boston movies, and here we are. So we did make a brief change up in our original lineup. We had originally suggested that we were going to watch the 1970 version of The Out of Towners. And we switched it out to Fever Pitch because after I watched it, I realized that they are only in Boston for like the first half an hour of The Out of Towners. And so, and it's dark and you don't really see anything. And so, although that movie, I think, has some interesting things in it, and I did watch the whole thing, I decided it was not the right one for this discussion
Right.
because, for one, they're they don't even want to be in Boston. They're hurrying to get away from Boston. Is the kind of the whole gist of that part of the movie. So in any case, we switched it out for 2005's Fever Pitch, which I think is a much better selection for our purposes. So, uh, anything to say about that generally before we jump right in?
No, I think that covers the impetus behind this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
even wearing like we went to Cape Cod and we went to the Cape Cod Baseball League, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
wearing my Yarmouth Red Sox t-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So it,
I suppose
uh,
I could have worn a Boston thing. Um, I have some, but yes. In any case, though, I wouldn't have necessarily. I suppose if I had really thought about it, like what did I think were going to be the common elements? Baseball was a big through line. Obviously, it was notable in all three films, Fenway Park, and just the Red Sox generally. That was kind of an interesting, uh, you know, correlation, and of course we have Ben Affleck in Good Will Hunting, also in The Town,
mhm.
and I don't know. Those are the things that jump right out at me. But
When
oh
I
yes,
also for fun just watched The Departed.
oh
So
yeah,
I Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting and in The Departed. So
yes, indeed. The Departed is a good movie, even if it wasn't one of the ones that we picked specifically for this purpose.
no, I
Yeah,
just and it had less baseball, but there are some really cool things in The Departed that do kind of highlight Boston that I can touch on very quickly when we get to that
sure.
part. But
Yeah, it's interesting just with some of these movies. Really, I had not watched Good Will Hunting or The Town either in a long time, and I realized when putting them on that I had not watched either of them since I have lived in Boston. And so watching them for the perspective of like, well, how Boston are they really? I wouldn't have known before. And now I do. But so in any case, let's jump right in. If we want to do these in chronological order, that would start with 1997's Good Will Hunting, directed by Gus Van Sant, the most winningest of these three movies, for sure.
And
Um,
if I'm not mistaken, it's what pretty much put Ben Affleck and Matt Damon on the map, right?
Yeah, well, so here's the thing is that they had actually done more stuff before it than I had realized. Certainly, I think it's what made them much bigger stars than they had been. But, because of course there's the whole story that they wrote the script together and then got it made and then they're in it. And this also, but one of the things that got Miramax agree to let Damon be the lead was that he had just gotten cast as the lead in The Rainmaker.
Mm.
And he had been in a few things in smaller parts before that, like School Ties. Here, let's see. I had just had that list up a little bit ago. But yeah, so he had been in a few things
Oh,
before.
yeah, and I was just looking, of course, like Affleck had been in Dazed and Confused.
Mm-hmm.
So they were in this world. Affleck was in Mallrats,
Mm-hmm.
Chasing Amy.
Yeah, and so he had been doing some stuff, but the casting in The Rainmaker was like his casting in that movie occurred while they were trying to get Good Will Hunting made. And so certainly when they're trying to get this movie made, he had not yet been the lead in anything. But, it was funny that he had been even in as much as that because sort of in my head, he was almost a complete unknown, which kind of, and I think this is still partly true just due to the timetable of how movies work. But he is, of course, the titular Private Ryan in Saving Private Ryan, which comes out the next year. And the way I had always had it in my head is that how interesting that Spielberg cast a guy that probably he would have anticipated that nobody would especially know, only for when the movie to come out, he's a big star. So, you know, but certainly for Matt Damon to win an Oscar, the in his first big leading role, that was catapulted him to stardom for sure. And then of course Ben Affleck as well, like who is I think for uh, wasn't quite the same, like considered quite in the same tier for a little while, but then obviously he's gone on with his own directorial efforts stuff, and he's been in lots of things. I guess I'm just sort of, I maybe that's just in my head. I don't know about you. I had kind of always preferred Damon to Affleck in a very general sort of way.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had a lot of similar things to like what you talked about with Matt Damon, and that like okay,
Mm-hmm.
he'd done a lot of things before, and then he went into a giant blockbuster right after Good Will Hunting when he
Mm-hmm.
was in Armageddon.
Yeah.
So they sort of peaked at the same time, and then
Yeah.
yeah, Affleck has kind of moved on to more directing stuff.
Mm-hmm. Case in
Uh,
point, our third movie today.
yes.
Yeah. But yeah, so this movie won a bunch of awards. It was Robin Williams, of course, um, uh, won a Best Actor in a Supporting Role. I misspoke a little bit. Damon didn't win the Oscar, but he was nominated. The Best Lead Actor went to Jack Nicholson for As Good as It Gets that year.
Yes.
But yeah, so nominations though for Damon and for Minnie Driver and Gus Van Sant for Best Director. But it did win. Robin Williams won for Best Supporting Actor, and then they did win for the screenplay, Best Original Screenplay. So he did win the Oscar, but it wasn't the acting one. If that's what you know,
Right.
uh, what people thought. I kind of misspoke it. but so yeah, it's a great movie. It was one that I certainly had fond memories of, but hadn't watched in a really long time. Um, and of course, watching it with the new sort of perspective of like, well, but how Bostony is it? Turns out pretty Bostony. Yeah. Um,
I mean, a
yeah.
lot of it's in and around Harvard.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, most of the filming, if I
Hmm.
remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, because like Harvard and MIT are both in Cambridge, which is certainly the Boston metro area. People would generally consider, you'd say that those are in Boston, and people wouldn't really argue with you unless you want to just really get into it's like, well, technically it's on the northwest side of the River Charles. So anyway, yes, it is. Those universities are technically in Cambridge, but that's all part of the Boston area.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think we could have the same conversation about the town being in
Oh yeah,
Charleston.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the point is that it's one of those like New York City, Boston is certainly like any big city really that it's got its various different little neighborhoods and it's a metro area, and so the idea that what people outside of Boston would call Boston is probably bigger than what people inside of Boston call Boston. Or if you wanted to go by strict, like what's the actual geographic footprint versus the regional thing. But yeah, it's but we get a lot of Boston themed stuff. We get to see several shots of Matt Damon riding the Red Line, which is a part of the MBTA. It's a partially subway, partially elevated train. The same line goes from above ground to below ground, depending on where on the line it is. But certainly recognized him riding that, and you know, shots of the river and shots of the sort of specific 3-story type of uh, kind of townhouse that is pretty common in Boston, and you don't see as much other places.
Yes. I think that's probably the thing I noticed the most about these movies was like the townhomes that
Mm-hmm.
are very unique to Boston.
Yeah, there's a specific kind, and I'm blanking on what they actually call it, but it's a little bit uh, unlike townhouses where you might see in other parts of the country, where often it will be like a duplex or something like that, where you have two connected units where both have multiple floors, but they sort of have front doors right next to each other, for example. Whereas these are they're 3 stories, and each story is its own unit, and so each would have its own external entrance. But um, you know, there's a first floor one and a second floor one and a third floor one. Yeah. But yeah, so the movie itself, as good as I remembered it. Yeah. I think there's a lot of good reasons that it was such a big hit at the time. And, it was fun to revisit it.
Can you hear my baby in the background?
No.
Okay.
um,
He's tired and frustrated, but anyway,
yeah.
so I'll go take care of that in a second. But we can finish
Okay.
this movie,
Well,
and then in the
sure.
transition, I'll go deal
Yeah.
with her.
So, and I think we can talk about the movies too, and not only just what about Boston in them, right? So
Yes.
I'm kind of just tossing stuff out, but I don't know. What was your take revisiting this one?
I it I was really glad to go revisit it, kind of like what you said. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it was such a good movie at the time. It's one I don't really watch a lot, but there's just such a fun, like, I don't I don't know. It's like this sort of like the whole idea of the self-taught like math genius
Mm-hmm.
who, you know, like this almost like nature versus nurture thing that it's looking at of like, oh, well, he's not part of this privileged community, so he's got all these problems with the law, but like that doesn't make him
Mm-hmm.
not smart, right?
Right.
And just the way that it kind of weaves this together with like even the villains, like I mean, the other student villains are kind of
Yeah,
cliche
there's
in a
not
way.
really like to the extent that there's an antagonist. It's really more abstract in the sense of Will's own personal demons. Are they going to keep him from being able to make the most of his talents?
Right, like so like when he's dealing with Stellan Skarsgård's character, you know, the other
Mm-hmm.
Skarsgård, who's the, you know, professor who he so I think everybody should at least know this, like Will is the janitor at MIT,
Yeah.
and there's a theory problem posted on a blackboard outside that Will solves
Mm-hmm.
anonymously like while he's cleaning, and it impresses everybody. And even Skarsgård's character, while he like recognizes Will's genius, like he also like challenges him on
Mm-hmm.
like the things that are doing wrong. But he's not like this. He's not a ridiculous caricature where like, oh, there's no way this janitor could be solving my super smart problems, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's and I really love that about this movie, right? Like that it doesn't while it uses themes of, you know, elitism and this and all that, it doesn't ever put anybody in that box. It's very human.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what I was struck the most is that like there's a human touch to like every interaction and every character, and you understand everybody's motivations, you know, throughout the whole thing. I that's I guess my simple take, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. You know, and like you get some interesting conflict that arises not because anyone's actual goals are opposed, but just because they've got their own baggage affecting the way they see the situation, right? Because you have, Robin Williams is playing the therapist, and Stellan Skarsgård, who, incidentally, there's a podcast joke that is too long to actually go into details for, but is the reason that I always, when thinking of Stellan Skarsgård, think of him as Stellar Skateboard. Um, Not that I'm ever actually confused, but it just I can't hear his name without thinking of the joke anymore. Anyway, uh, they are, uh, the Robin Williams is dealing with his wife, grief over the loss of his wife, and just sort of feeling like he's kind of retreated from some of the bigger things that he might have been interested in doing, and he sort of justifies that. Well, I'm still helping people, so that's it. I'm not running away. I'm not hiding, even though he is kind of perhaps, still walling himself up in a little shrine. Um, but then you also have Stellan Skarsgård's character who has, at the same time that he wants to see Will succeed, there is an element where it's a little bit like with sports when if another team beats your team, you kind of want that team to do well because it means you were at least beaten by the best, right? You were beaten by a good team.
Right.
Um, Whereas for him, where he's feeling like, I have always thought of myself as really good at this stuff, and he just has this natural aptitude where he is so much better at it than me, even when he acts like he doesn't care about it and is going to throw it all away. And so there's kind of a shame and an anger and a resentment underneath his genuine, sincere desire to help this kid, right? Because it's the sort of thing where, like, if someone who's even better at the thing you do doesn't care about it, that's not going to make you feel good about what you do.
Right.
And so there's an element of that. And so just, and then of course you have Will himself, where, like one of the things that I hadn't necessarily remembered is that he's not just like a savant exactly. He's really smart, but he has studied. He just hasn't gone through like the formal education. Like they talk about how it's like, well, yeah, you're a janitor, but you could be a janitor anywhere. You certainly seem to have taken a janitor job where you can access the libraries at MIT, for example. You
Right.
know, so and you have read a lot of those books, and in fact one of the satisfying scenes of taking down this asshole at the bar is basically just pointing out, it's kind of like, yeah, you're making specific points that come right out of the book that you, so I even know what class you must have just been in because you've read this book. So when you read this one next semester, you're going to be saying this. And then when you read that one the next semester, and he's just like pointing out, not only have I read all of those, but I'm further ahead in the curriculum than you are. And so I can recognize that you're just plagiarizing the points made by writers smarter than you.
Right.
And so that's a very satisfying scene, but like it also just highlights that he has been studying. He's just been like self-taught, and not, uh, he's not just coincidentally good at it. It's not like he's not Rain Man or something,
Right.
right? But at the same time, partially because of like just the sort of socialization that he has got growing up where he did, and also his own specific traumas have led him, he is very hostile and defensive about any suggestion that he's actually special in any way, because it's kind of the classic underachieving um, kind of case where he doesn't want to stand out. He wants to be just like the rest of the guys, because it's this feeling of like, well, if you stand out, you get hurt. And even when there's this potential, there's this feeling of this defensiveness, right? And so I like the setup. I think the setup is really interesting. Just that he's got this group of knuckleheads that he hangs out with, that are good guys, more or less. Like they get into some trouble, obviously, which is part of his. He's got his own rage problem, which is why he just picks a fight with this guy. Um, and it's one of those things where even if even his friends are telling him, it's like, okay, you're saying that it's like, oh yeah, no, you got to stand up to this guy because he was going to do something to you, or he did something to you already, but like keep pounding on the guy as the police roll up. Take a swing
Right.
at the cop who's trying to pull you off of him. uh that's all going to get you into a lot of trouble. But so I think that the just leading into having the conflict and the themes about this movie really all be about dealing with those sorts of interior feelings, that like in particular feelings with all three of these characters of people who would tell you that they're really okay and they've got it all figured out, and they're it's like, maybe, yeah, okay, some of that's in there, but I've got it handled. But all three of them kind of discovering through their interactions with each other that maybe it's not as handled as it could be, and they need to work on it. As opposed to a conflict where there's just some mean guy who wants to shut down the English department or something.
Right.
The two big things from this movie that I feel like have been the real lasting moments, though, the two bits that I think are almost instantly recognizable even years later for anyone who's seen it. I'm thinking of two in particular, but let's see if you can guess the two I'm thinking of. I bet you will.
I mean, you already described one of them, which is the conversation in the bar.
Yeah, I was thinking specifically of the finale, so to speak, of that.
Oh, when he
Yeah, I
slams her
got her
number
number.
over,
How
he
how
says, "I
about
got her
how do you
number.
like
How do you
those
like them
apples? Yeah,
apples?"
yeah.
Yeah, that one, obviously.
Hmm.
Uh, hmm. I'm sure it'll click when you say it.
If you
What's
can't think about it, if you can't think of it, it's not your fault. It's not your fault.
oh, is that the
It's not your fault. That's the thing I was thinking of, just in the repetition of the line until he breaks down.
oh yeah, yeah, when they're like hugging
Yeah, well, where it
or
like it
they
gets to there, right? Yeah, so
right.
that
He says it's not your fault, it's not your fault, it's not your fault.
well,
Yeah.
right, because what he keeps kind of bumping up against at first is that Will's got all these layers of kind of like, I know it's not my fault. What aren't you listening? And then of course like, yeah, I know. But then it's because it's like he's just got all of these sort of rationalized layers of armor built up around the fact that you know, there's a part of him that does think it's his fault. And he needs to hear someone that he respects tell him that it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
But
you're
I,
right, you're right.
I just
It's
feel
all
like the
perfect.
repeated "it's not your fault" is something I feel like I see a lot, even though you just watched it and it didn't stand out to you as much as I was thinking. But that's all right. It's not your
It
fault.
yeah, it didn't it didn't, but like yes, no, I know what you're talking about right now. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, I think all those things and you know, and like his relationship with Robin Williams is
Hmm.
awesome, right? Because like there's obviously this, like Robin Williams continues to do his job correctly and like peel back the layers, but Will peels back the layers on Robin Williams'
Yeah.
character as well,
Yeah.
right? And
Well,
to your
and
point,
it's
we kind of covered like the sort of the high level of like, he hasn't ever really dealt with his wife's death.
hmm
And there's some times where like Will thinks he's being like real clever and I think that's some of the greatest moments in the movie, right? Or like,
hmm
Will's doing the right thing by the storyline, right? Like he's pushing back and we're getting to understand a
right.
little bit
Yeah.
more
It's a
about Robin
lot of
Williams'
it's
character.
very Hollywood therapy in the sense that I think probably professional therapists would look at a lot of the things that Robin Williams does and say, nah, no, he shouldn't do that.
Yeah,
But obviously, because we're telling a story, it's a kind of a different situation.
right. So I think that's also another memorable scene is like when he keeps like taking digs at him and like
Hmm.
you understand like he's trying to discredit him as a therapist, but he's
Hmm.
also like really hitting a nerve. And
Yeah,
then
it's
finally,
it's
Robin Williams is just like, "Hey, listen." I don't remember what he calls him, but it's like he says, "Listen, you little shit," or something like that, right? Like, and then he goes into the story about like this is this like you're missing part of this, right?
hmm
Like, and then he then later reflects back and says, "Well, actually, he did pull part of some of the things I've been covering out of me, right? Like, it's not
hmm
all like done this like." But he does legitimately like put him in his place at one point
yeah.
when he's like, hey, like,
Well, I think it was the first time that Will said something about the wife and not
yeah,
like not an insult of Robin Williams, but about the wife instead. Like she must have been really stupid to go for a guy like you or something like that. And this is after a whole bunch of insults that he just lets roll over him. But then as soon as he's like insulting the wife, he says, you shut your goddamn mouth or something like that.
yeah, you shut your goddamn mouth. Yeah. And that's, well, and this actually is where you get one of the baseball connections
Mm-hmm.
is because
Mm-hmm.
that's when he tells the story about how he gave up his World Series tickets to chase this girl who
Mm-hmm.
then passed away, and he never regrets it. Like, and it's just it. Robin Williams just does such a great, like, I'm shortchanging that monologue, but
Mm-hmm.
like it's so good
Yeah.
because to the point about, like, again, like, not trying to bring the Boston thing in, but like you understand that having like Red Sox World Series
Mm-hmm.
tickets, like, without him having to go into it, like, and even Matt Damon's like, oh yeah, I remember that game, yeah, it was, and he's talking
Mm-hmm.
about it, he's like, yeah, I didn't go, I had tickets and I didn't make it, and he's like, what are you, stupid, he goes, no,
Mm-hmm.
I met this girl,
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know, and it's, yeah, though, like, all those kind of little moments are so good, right, to
Mm-hmm.
revisit.
Yeah. So, I guess maybe to wrap up with Good Will Hunting, I think great movie, but on a Boston scoring uh, scale, I would say probably of the three, it might still be the least Bostony of the three, but only because the other two are extremely Bostony. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so Good Will Hunting obviously set around Harvard and MIT, but it could have been some other university. We see some other, they talk about the Red Sox. Um, he rides the T, but otherwise, so it's authentically set there, but it's not necessarily about Boston in the way that the other two are.
Yes.
All right, so shall we move along then to 2005's Fever Pitch?
Yes.
All right. So, probably this one is less well known than Good Will Hunting, perhaps. So, just to briefly cover, it is a romantic comedy starring Drew Barrymore and Jimmy Fallon, and it is a story of this cute couple that fall in love in the off season, only for when baseball season starts, she discovers that he is actually an obsessive, extreme Red Sox fan to the point that it pretty much dominates his life while the season is in play. And she has to kind of decide if that is something she can put up with or not.
Yes.
And that's the
Well, I
basic
think
idea there.
so. Yes, and this, I'm a little more familiar with this film just because it's actually not a remake. Well, I guess there might be a
I
British.
well,
It's based on a British
mm-hmm,
book called Fever Pitch about Arsenal,
yeah,
and it's all drawn around that. And it's written by the author who wrote High Fidelity, which was also repurposed and Americanized, and
yeah,
I feel like very well. I think Nick Hornby is the author. I think he writes really good, like, challenging romantic comedies around these sort of niche,
mm-hmm,
like, things. And that's kind of how this is. It's like his love of the Red Sox
yeah.
is similar to the love of music and vinyl that is in
Yeah.
High Fidelity, right? Like,
Or the love of
yeah,
football, aka soccer.
yeah,
Um, which with a fun pun in the Americanization, because of course in football, aka soccer, the field is called the pitch. But
yes,
in baseball, it's also a pitch, so you can still call it fever pitch, and it's still the pun works both ways,
it did. It worked well.
which is fun.
So,
Um, Another interesting element, though, about the making this version of it is that the year that they're making it just happens to also be the year that the Red Sox finally win the World Series after a really long time. What was it? It was like since 1918 or something.
yes,
Um, so the fact that they literally rewrote the ending of the movie because that was happening, um, which is
which
kind of
even it is, and even more amusing
mm-hmm,
is that the original book was written after an Arsenal similar time when they won the league title after a very long drought.
Mm-hmm.
And so the original ending of the book is actually more similar to the ending that they landed on,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't know that because they were shooting it during the season, right? And so
Right. Yeah.
they had anticipated doing a different ending.
Mm-hmm.
So
So definitely some fun stuff there. Just as a tangent, we have a cameo from Stephen King, the writer, in this movie because in one of the early games, the opening day game of that season, he throws out the first pitch. That also takes place in the book that Stephen King nonfiction wrote with Stuart Onan about this season of the Red Sox called Faithful, where they decided between the two of them to chronicle a season of the Red Sox, also without knowing that it was gonna coincidentally be the season that the Red Sox won the World Series. So this is a book that I listened to the audiobook of because I've been on a separate project along with a podcast that's not one of mine, but I listened to it. That's been going through all of Stephen King's books. And so I listened to the audiobook of that, but it was just interesting watching this and watching that scene, having heard Stephen King himself talk about that particular event, especially because the Red Sox lost that game, and the Boston Globe blamed him for it.
yes, which is a lot of the fun of this movie, right? It's
Yeah.
just like the obsession over things like that in
Mm-hmm.
Boston, right? Like just how much the Red Sox mean to that town, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yes.
it's it's unique. I
Well,
mean,
sure,
it's
and
it's probably like the Eagles to Philadelphia, right? Like
mm-hmm.
there's certain things that just like people associated with that city are just like wrap themselves up in the sports thing to the point where
Mm-hmm.
like the actual newspaper writes a story that they lost a game because of the opening pitch,
Well,
right? Like,
and I mean it's the sports page, right?
yeah,
But the point is that like I think a lot of sports and a lot of athletes tend to be superstitious regardless, but I think baseball is one of the most notoriously superstitious sports.
hmm,
And the whole thing about the curse of the Bambino that they talk about in this movie, which is this idea that when the manager or the owners of the Red Sox traded Babe Ruth to the Yankees way back when, in order to finance a Broadway play, that cursed the Red Sox for to always be losing a losing team forever after. And so the idea of being a Red Sox fan, although there are other teams where this can be true for a while as well, the Red Sox had kind of this reputation of, well, you love them even though they break your heart every year.
yeah,
And so it's just this idea that it's kind of almost an inherently pathetic creature. A Red Sox fan was this idea at the time. It's less true now that they've actually won the World Series a couple of more times. But the point just being that there is this curse, this superstition that it's kind of like nobody really takes seriously except maybe a little bit. And maybe, like don't take your hat off. If you were wearing that hat when they won the game last week, you need to wear the same hat this week. And that sort of thing. um I actually found I had watched this movie once before pretty casually, like it was on and I watched it. And so I had seen it before, but watching it a little more, like paying a little more attention this time, I think it's a very sweet movie. I think it's probably this comes from, Nick Hornby writes good stuff. But, just for example, their first date being she has terrible food poisoning and he just takes care of her all night and is a total gentleman about it, even as he is scrubbing her bathroom uh, while she sleeps. Um, like that's just that's sort of like that's an endearing moment, but like having this dilemma that because the movie's really told from Drew Barrymore's perspective, right? Like she meets this great guy and he's so great, but then, like as it's starting to get towards spring, he does at one point like have to tell her, it's like, well, so something you should know about me is that, I'm a baseball fan. And she's like, oh yeah, sure, lots of people are. And he's like, well, yeah, but it's kind of a big part of my life. I've got season tickets. I go to every home game and lots of the away games, and also I will cancel other big plans in order to do that. And also, my emotional state is almost entirely dependent on how well the Red Sox are doing at any given moment. And um,
Yes.
and so the scene where she is still kind of not fully appreciating, even though he's tried to be pretty honest about it,
Yeah.
but she's fully doesn't fully appreciate it until she sees like she knows he went down to see some spring training, but then he's actually on the news with like his face made up and just screaming like a crazy person. Um, and she's starting to like, oh, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I do also like though is that they, even though it's, I mean, it's a rom-com nod,
Mm-hmm.
right? They give a reason for him,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the fact that like his parents divorced and his
Mm-hmm.
uncle took him to cheer him up, and then
Yeah.
his uncle left him the tickets, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, it doesn't dwell on that because again, it's sort of rom-com
Mm-hmm.
explanation, but I like that it's there, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
just,
It's
you
like
know,
the psychology of it really just reads, like we
yeah,
can as the audience understand that there's maybe an aspect of this that is not entirely healthy. However, there is also the fact that he's got a community around him based
yes,
on
I
this.
like that
He
was going
has
to be my
his
next point.
fellow season ticket friends, his family that are there that he's been with. He sees them, hundreds of times a year at games for years and years. And they're his family and everyone's there together. It's this community, it's this support structure around him that maybe has a slightly unhealthy amount of superstition layered onto it all, but not in a way that's necessarily bad as much as, if you're gonna be with this guy, you have to understand that it's a big part of his life.
Yeah. And I like to your point there, that was going to be my second piece is right. Like they give him a reason for why he's like so obsessed
Mm-hmm.
to begin with. But then like you said, they give him this community which I think is really great. Like that's a real thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
and so it makes it harder to be dismissive of like, oh, he's just this like loony Red Sox fan, right? Like no, like he became endeared to going to Red Sox games because it
Mm-hmm.
cheered him up from his parents' divorce. And oh hey, he this is where his friends are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether that's okay or not okay, like
Yeah.
that is his life. And
Right.
so it's more to him than just like, oh, I'm going to give up my season tickets. It's like, I'm going to give up the community that I go to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's one of those things too where like I, this element of what you are willing to give up or not give up or put up with or not put up with in a relationship, is a real fair question, and it would not be unfair of her to feel like that's not something she's willing to have become a big part of her life, right? Like that I think it would be fair for her to say, you seem like a great guy. I can't deal with this. It's like it's a valid deal breaker depending on the person, right? Because it's pretty extreme. But that's not to say that she definitely should, because it's more of a question of like, well, they find a compromise that like, well, I'm also kind of a workaholic, and she eventually kind of starts to realize that she's maybe doing that in kind of the same way that he's doing the Red Sox stuff.
Hmm.
Um, it's like, so maybe there's times where, like, I won't have to feel bad about working so much if you're so busy with the Red Sox stuff. So maybe that'll kind of work. It's almost kind of like having a semi long distance relationship for part of the year. But then she also kind of gets into it. She's willing to go to a lot of the games with him. But, you still get these flashes of moments where, like, she wants him to come visit her parents, and he can't, like, he's being a crazy person because he makes the terrible, terrible sacrifice of not going to a specific game, not watching it live so that he can go to dinner with her parents. But when they're in a Boston restaurant and people are wanting to talk about the game that is ongoing, he's like literally going la 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 la, I can't hear you, and he's like shouting in the restaurant. And because he's been eating lobster, he's got butter all over his fingers, he makes her put her fingers in his ears so that he won't hear them talk spoilers about the baseball game that he's recording. And so some of that sort of stuff, and then the scene where she gets hit in the face with the foul ball and doesn't necessarily register until later when she sees the replay that he takes more time than he should have to realize that she had been knocked unconscious by the baseball. He's kind of still very much in the moment of, hey, look, a foul ball came over here, like jumping around, high-fiving the guy, and while she's just slumped unconscious in the seat.
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to say I love that scene, obviously, because it's about someone getting knocked out, but
Yeah.
like it's such a great scene in the movie
Mm-hmm.
because she gets hit by the foul ball because she's working on her laptop,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it like kind of hits on that theme
Mm-hmm.
too, where yes, she's right. He did take too long to kind of console her, but she put
Mm-hmm.
herself in that position by her own, like vice, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not just him. And so yeah, it's it's very sweet, very fun,
Mm-hmm.
very I just
Yeah, and we get a nice big finish where, of course, they do break up for a while in classic rom-com fashion, where we have, our end of act 2, all that sort of thing, where he basically goes into like a depression spiral. And it's funny, like his friends have to break down his door, and they find him watching a video compilation of Red Sox like mishaps and errors and stuff like that. And so they're like, I thought you took that away from him, he must have had another one. And it's almost like drugs or something, right? And so, but it gets to the point where he is feeling like he's so depressed that he decides that, she was actually right. I'm too obsessed with this. It's going to keep me from ever being happy. I have to sell my season tickets, which again it's good writing because we can kind of understand why he would go there, and yet we as the audience recognize that even though his obsession has been extreme, that is an extreme reaction to this situation, that
right.
he is going to regret it if he does that. And so for her to hear that he is going to sell his season tickets is what she is like. She's realizing, I can't let him do that. He gets so much out of this, and he's only doing it now because he's depressed. I have to stop him. And it's not even about getting back together. It's about, like, don't throw this whole part of your life away.
Right.
Right. And so, of course, the contrivances of the rom-com are such that in order to stop him, she has to jump down from the backfield and run across the field, interrupting the game in order to do that. Although I will say, I think the fact that they're at Fenway does complicate the scene just a little bit, because she has to drop like 30 feet to the outfield to get onto the field from where she is. And I was watching that shot and just going like, I hope she doesn't break both her legs. But I mean, she's fine. But the point just being that it's like from that spot in Fenway is a pretty significant drop. Like
Yes.
even they just show it. Like she's like hanging down from the ledge, and her feet are still like 20 feet above the of the field. But yeah. So in any case, this one, lots of Fenway stuff, lots of Red Sox stuff, some location shots in Boston. It's all about that stuff, but it's obviously like mostly focused around Fenway and baseball and everything, which is a big part of the Boston identity for sure. I think probably Fenway Park is the Boston landmark that would be most recognizable to people who don't live in Boston. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like there's certainly other ones that are like the Revolutionary, like Paul Revere's house or the Old North Church or something, where maybe you've kind of heard about it, but it's not like you would necessarily know it if you saw it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think probably the other most is the State House,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is the only reason I bring that up is like that's very prominent in The Departed, which again we're not talking about. Like the fact that like that is such a key piece of like showing that like Matt Damon's character is making more money
Hmm.
than he really should is because he can see the gold dome of the State House
Yeah.
from his like full windowed balcony,
Hmm.
right? It really leans into that when you watch it from like the perspective that we were talking about of like Boston
Hmm.
movies. That that's in there several times where you're
Yeah.
like, that's not a place normal people live, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Like, cause if people who don't know Boston, the State House is right adjoining. Like, it looks down over Boston Common, which is a big park like Central Park. And yes, it's very expensive to live in that area.
Yes.
Um,
And that's why I say, like, yes, Fenway, obviously, most people know Fenway, but like the State House is that gold dome
yeah.
in Boston. People are people think
It
about.
is, of course, also the landmark that The Last of Us chose for the Boston segment of the first game. I actually didn't watch the show, so I don't know if they changed that in the show version. But there is an action set piece where they're running around inside the State House in the early phase of that game. But anyway, yes. So Fever Pitch is actually pretty good, and
On the
um,
what?
I Drew Barrymore is great. Jimmy Fallon's fine. Like he does the job in this movie. I don't especially have strong feelings about Jimmy Fallon otherwise, but he gets the job done here.
He does.
Yeah. All right. So are we ready to move on to 2010's The Town?
Yes, I'm gonna go take a very fast look at my baby while you
Okay.
trend. Yeah, I think
Sure.
she's fine. I just want to be sure
Yeah.
because I'm single dad right now.
Sure. Uh, so The Town is a 2010 um, uh, movie directed by, co-written and directed by Ben Affleck, who we were talking about previously. Was this his first directed movie? Now I can't remember if it was his first. If he had done something else before this. Let's see if I can't find that out. But it is named for a nickname for Charlestown, which, as we were discussing earlier, Cambridge is part of the Boston metro area, but technically its own city. And from a legal standpoint, Charlestown is similar. In fact, it is just north of Cambridge. And many of these, Boston locations like the Bunker Hill Monument and the USS Constitution are all located in Charlestown. Um, and so it is, it is definitely set there. And at least to hear this movie tell it, it was also the like record holder for most bank robberies in or something.
Yeah, yeah, it has some weird stat of like most bank robberies per capita or whatever.
Mm,
It's got something to just, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so it was not his first directed movie. He did a short in 1993 um, called. I'm only mentioning this because of the title. Um, I killed my lesbian wife, hung her on a meat hook, and now I have a three-picture deal at Disney, which he made back in 1993, probably when he was an edgelord college student. But in any case, he also in 2007 did "Gone Baby Gone," which was before the town. So
Yes.
yeah. Um, so we have in this movie basically we've got a crew of bank robbers who rob banks and don't want to get caught, but they discover that because so Jeremy Renner's character is like he's the new guy on the crew, right? Like he hadn't been. Am I misremembering that?
No.
So yeah, so he is a little bit more hair trigger, a little bit more edgy, more prone to, more easily provoked to violence. And in his debut bank robbery, he decides to take one of these young tellers hostage. It's interesting, I think, that I don't think anyone else ever finds out that she was, in fact, the one that hit the silent alarm, right?
No.
Because we see her do it, but I don't think any of the other characters ever find out. Um, but it doesn't matter necessarily. But in any case, it's not why they take her hostage. But they take her hostage and then they eventually do let her go. But then they realize after the fact that she lives in the same neighborhood they do and so might be able to uh, identify them. Even though they were wearing masks, there's just the added concern that what if they got she got a better look at them, she spent some time with them, she heard them talking. We also know that she saw a specific neck tattoo that the Jeremy
No.
Renner character has. um, so in an attempt to have Jeremy Renner not kill her, Ben Affleck decides I'm going to try to like watch her for a little bit to see if she seems like she's going to be able to place us or not. But almost immediately that also becomes a little bit stalkery because he's kind of attracted to her. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, we get a developing romance blooming between a bank robber and the woman who doesn't realize that she was their hostage. Um, all the while, we have John Hamm, the FBI guy, trying to take this crew down. So, um,
Yes. I think it's it's what I actually kind of respect about this movie is all
mm-hmm,
the things that you just sort of described
mm-hmm.
of like how this can be considered kind of like stalkery and like weird and
I
all
mean,
that.
not
Like
even a little bit. I mean, it's like, yeah,
it's it when you're watching the movie and you're kind of in it,
mm-hmm.
like he's actually created an environment where you're like kind of rooting for them. But
Well, yeah, no, I
like you when you
once
step back
once
and you're
they
like,
have a connection, it's
yeah,
not that the connection is false, but he certainly does meet her under false pretenses after following her around, which is also after taking her hostage in a bank robbery.
yes.
Which, to be fair, in defense of Ben Affleck's character, he didn't want them to do that. And he was instrumental in her not being harmed during that whole process. But so we understand that he's a nice guy and he's kind of doing it for her own good anyway. But still, I think that if you had been through a traumatic crime experience like that and then you met a great person and you go on several dates with them and you start having a real relationship with them, and then you find out that they were one of the people who did the crime to you, and then they were following you around afterwards. I don't think I would feel great about that.
No, no, and that's what I'm saying. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the genius parts of this movie is that like you're like feeling these conflicted feelings the whole time, right?
Mhm.
Because like you're watching it from his perspective, like you're
Mhm.
bought into like he's the protagonist, right? Like
Yeah.
he's Robin Hood, right? Like he's the bank robber with the heart.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you know, he knows that
He's the nice
it's
one for
what's
sure.
that?
He's the nice one. I was going to
He's the
say
nice
it's
one.
not
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he's giving it to the poor.
No, no,
But
no.
yeah.
I didn't mean it like that. I
I
was
know what you mean though. I know what you mean
yeah,
though. Yes, he's the he's the nice guy where only robbing banks who are insured anyway and no one ever gets hurt and all that stuff.
right.
Mhm.
And it's like yeah, it's like sort of the kind of the aspirational like outlaw that
Mhm.
you kind of want to be. And it's written and directed and honestly from Affleck's perspective like delivered so perfectly of
Mhm.
like he's just kind of like but then you like sit back and you're like yeah but you are a bank robber, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you are doing the
Well,
wrong
and it's one
thing
of those things
and you
where
are
like
stalking her and you
yeah.
are yeah.
Well, it's almost not even a moral judgment so much as just he is in denial of the fact that this is going to eventually be a deal breaking problem. Not even just in the sense of the romance, but like you're not going to be able to hide this forever. This idea that like he can make everything be okay and then well, hey, maybe if we do this one last job, then we'll have enough money we won't have to do it anymore and then it will be fine, right? Which is just the classic criminal movie thing.
Yes, which is also like one of the great things about this movie is that like it leans into the one last job
Mhm.
like cliche. It knows it's a cliche, and so but instead of like joking about it, right? Like they just lean into it, right? And one last job becomes Fenway,
Mhm.
right? Like like I it's not the greatest movie I've ever seen. It's not the best, but there are just so many like little
Mhm.
things in it where you're just like, that was pretty good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. This is not a criticism at all, but you can feel in every third shot how much these guys like the movie Heat.
Yeah.
I and again, this is not a complaint or a criticism, but it's extremely influenced by Heat for sure.
Yes.
Um
Took LA and poured it in Boston,
yeah.
Yeah.
Which as just another coincidental little crossing dots for no reason, Michael Mann was apparently one of the people originally considered to be the director for Good Will Hunting before they went with Gus Van Sant.
Hmm.
Partly because what Michael Mann wanted to do was to make them be car thieves. Will and his buddies should be car thieves, is what Michael Mann said.
That's funny.
Anyway, so that's a very tangential connection. But yes, like, so we get obviously a lot of time spent in and around Charlestown, of course, but also in the North End. So, and I think of the places that you and I actually went in Boston when you visited, the town is very much the one that is, you know, overlapped the most with the stuff that you saw specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course like also spends time in Fenway as you pointed out where they stage a whole big gunfight action sequence in it and that's kind of fun. I am sure that they recreated that in a set. I don't think they would have let them actually shoot that in real Fenway, but it looked pretty authentic.
It felt real.
Hmm. Yeah, so you didn't go to Fenway on this trip. Have you ever been to Fenway before?
I have been to Fenway, yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've been to a couple of games there myself. So yeah, it's just as people who have been to Fenway can tell you that yeah, that's at least that part of it. That's what it looks like. um, so yeah, they. I was just trying to see if there was. any detail about the filming of that in on the Wikipedia, and I'm not seeing anything. Probably because it was, you know, built on a set. But yeah, so I think we get a lot of interesting stuff in this movie. It was not Jeremy Renner's first movie, but I think this was maybe the one where he started really getting a lot more attention because he obviously got an Oscar nomination for this one for Best Supporting Actor, and I think that's just where his new reputation kind of formed from this, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, when was Hurt Locker? I will
Mm.
have that in a moment. Um, I also found myself in rewatching this, thinking to myself, Rebecca Hall is great. Why isn't she in more stuff? And you know, if she's in stuff, it's just not the stuff I've been watching, I guess. Let's see. Hurt Locker was 2008, so technically before this, I guess. So
Yeah.
never mind. I guess I'm misremembering it, kind of like what we were talking about with Good Will Hunting a little bit. But yeah, so Hurt Locker was 2 years before this. And he had been in 28 Weeks later before that, amongst lots of other things where he's in smaller roles. He'd been in lots of stuff. But yeah, I don't know why in my head this was maybe just because he was kind of the standout acting performance in this movie was why he was getting a lot of attention, even though he had already obviously been, um, The Hurt Locker was, a well-regarded movie, and I think people liked him in it, but it was maybe not quite. Well, let's see.
He got a Academy
He was
Award
it.
nomination.
Yeah, he was nominated for the Oscar that year as well. So, and it was in the Best Picture movie. So I don't know why in my head the town was like, oh yeah, he was this lesser known guy. I think it was only because I read a piece of trivia that said that it was originally going to be cast as someone else, and then they brought him in for it. I think like Casey Affleck recommended him because they'd worked together on something. But in any case, who knows with the various little bits of trivia. But yeah, so this movie, I think, like you said, I think it's a action heavy crime drama with very competently made and well executed, and it's not necessarily like doing anything in particular that no other movie has done before, but it's delivering.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very great description of it. Like, there's nothing in here where you're like, yes, like this really put that on the scene of movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it just it doesn't exist. Like you said, it lifts from Heat, it lifts from Point Break with the masks.
Mm-hmm.
Like it takes all these very good formulaic bank robber things,
Mm-hmm.
puts it in Boston, gives it a very
Yeah.
Boston.
It does have a car chase through a neighborhood that we drove through when you came to visit. So.
Yes, I I recognize all of these things. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun. I think that's a good car chase too, just because I think it was sort of an atypical location for a movie car chase. You know what I mean? Because it's a lot of sort of very narrow streets, and alleys that I feel like usually they don't do a lot of car chases through streets like that, probably because it's dangerous.
yep.
But yeah, so in any case, we watched a trio of Boston movies, and they were all good ones. And The Out of Towners was okay too, even if they only spent half an hour in Boston. So,
Yeah, counters. So
all right, we ready to pick our movies for next time?
yeah,
All right. I think we had both discussed an interest in doing something more sort of like classic Hollywood, something less recent. I will confess to having failed to come up with any particular uh, metric or list to choose from there, but I think that I could imagine a lot of different possible movies. Do we want to just pick two movies from the that great big sight and sound list again? That would be another way to go. Just with sort of a focus on something a little more,
More classic.
yeah. And we don't have to go all the way back to black and white necessarily, but let's say like maybe you know no more recent than the 70s.
Sorry. Yep. Let's see here.
Do you need a link? I've got the this that greatest
Got
films
it.
of all time link that we've used sometimes.
I've got it.
Okay, good. All right. This is a it's a classic list, of course, that has lots of things on it that we have watched already or talked about. Um, and then there's lots of foreign films that would be great to watch too. That would maybe be something we could do for another future episode. Is like talk again about like some foreign cinema that we haven't watched recently. But let's stick with classic Hollywood for now, though. Scrolling up. Uh, I'm just looking at calling things out, not necessarily suggesting them yet. But we got Billy Wilder's "Some Like It Hot." Did we watch that already? I feel like no. Did we?
Did.
Well, maybe we did. I'm going to pull up our list so that I can confirm that. But certainly good movie. So let's see. We've got because we certainly did like The Apartment was part of the original list. Some Like It Hot might have also been. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, it was. Yes. So never mind. Wouldn't do that one. Um, one of the things that I think had partly drawn me to wanting to do some classic Hollywood was actually specifically the discussion that we've touched on briefly too, which is Orson Welles directed Citizen Kane, which is what many people regard as one of the greatest movies of all time, right? And it's kind of this huge, shocking success story from a young filmmaker. But he also made a whole bunch of other movies that, like, I've seen relatively few of those other movies, and so watching some of those other movies could be really interesting.
Have we done the third man?
Hmm?
Have we done?
I think I feel like we actually may have done The Third Man, but that's also he's only the star of that. He didn't direct that one.
Right.
Carol Reed. Let's see. Is my search function actually successfully? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, that search isn't finding my. We've got such a long list now that yes, we did The Third Man. We did that along with Rashomon, and Metropolis, I think. So let's see. We've got. Well, you know what? I'm just gonna pick Touch of Evil, which is an Orson Welles movie that it's actually one that I have seen. So maybe I should pick one that I haven't seen, but I want to watch Touch of Evil again.
Fine. We'll go with that. And I'm not on that list. I'm on a different list now.
Okay, so. That's fine too. Yeah.
Mutiny on the Bounty.
Oh, okay.
Gable.
I think there's been a couple of versions, but the one with Clark Gable.
The one with Clark Gable is, I feel like, very classic Hollywood because of the way it's done in the sort of contract
Mm-hmm.
employee type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the 1935 version with Clark Gable and Charles Lawton.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, okay, cool. So let's do that then. So for next time, Mutiny on the Bounty, 1935 version, and Touch of Evil. All right. Thanks, everybody. And, we will be back soon with more movie discussion. And in the meantime, watch good movies.
Watch good movies.